going on? It's Kevin Kenny. This is the Build series, and we're about to be joined on stage by a rock and roll Hall of Famer and New York Times bestseller who has a brand new album, Tenderness, out and available everywhere May 31st. Please let's give a warm Build welcome to Duff McKagan.
Thank you very much.
Usually they wait till then to applaud, but you were getting applause when you just walked on stage, man. That's pretty rad.
Well, I've never, the lyric video for this song, I've never actually sat with people and watched this thing. So that was there's a first for that, and or a crowd reaction. You know, sat in a room when that song was played with other people.
More or less nerve-wracking where if you were in the video and watching it with people.
Oh God, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I try not to put myself in those situations.
Yeah. We're sorry to put you there this morning. But thanks for stopping by, Bill. This is awesome. Tenderness is out very, very soon.
Yes.
And it's a story, the journey behind this album. It's one that you hear a lot about in film, where something starts as a book, it's adapted for the big screen. But this started as a book and was adapted for an album. And it makes me think of a question that I have a lot for songwriters a lot of the time, where, at what point does poetry or the written word become lyrics?
Right. I'd written, there were observations, and I was a columnist for the Seattle Weekly for 5 years. And out of that, I wrote my first book. I had found a voice, a writing voice. And when you're a columnist, I had a weekly column. I found myself becoming an observationalist because I had to write the column for the next week. So I would take a situation, even like something like this, a live thing where they're showing my video, and how does that? It's so weird. You're just an artist. You're writing songs, and then it becomes public, and people hear your songs, and that first reaction, I might write about that. How does that feel as an artist? But my point to that is, I wrote my first book, and it was an observation on myself, and in that I would write passages, like 4,000 word passages, sitting next to maybe one of my daughters who was little at the time, and I lied. When you tell your story, we find ourselves, I found myself telling a different story. It was other people's fault. I didn't get myself all junkied out and strung out. It was somebody else's fault, right? And I would have to erase 4,000 words because I was lying to myself. I was sitting next to like one of my babies, and I would have to rewrite that portion of the story and tell the truth. Right. What's my part in this story? And that self-reflection really opened up. I'd been sober for some time, but I hadn't really dug. I hadn't dug that deep. And the book, I dug deep, that first book. I wrote a second book, which is more humorous and observations of traveling, of being a father. It's called How to Be a Man and Other Illusions, because I'm just trying to figure it out still. The third book I was thinking of writing was inarguably last few years have been some of the most interesting times in our history. Anybody's in this room, right? Guns N' Roses did a tour, which was one of the most amazing things. Us getting back together and rekindling that brotherhood, and was amazing. But aside from that, the things I noticed, observed, I'm a history fanatic. And since I've been sober for 25 years, my wife claims I've read nearly 1,000 history books since she's known me. So I really dive in hard, and I read every night. And so historically speaking, when you read enough, you start seeing things that are going on now, and you're like, well, that happened before here and there and the other time. This was the result of such and such thing, and in this very interesting historic time, I thought I started writing little vignettes, starts of chapters, homelessness, the divide they were talking about, which I didn't see because I was out touring to crowds that were together. Nobody asks who you vote for when you come to a Guns N' Roses show. It's this like togetherness thing, and we all got each other's back. And I go out and see really nerdy, touristy stuff all the time. And I never once did, I would go to like the alligator guy on the airboat in the swamps. Alligators eat hot dogs and marshmallows. Who knew? But we didn't talk about politics. And World War I music. All over America I went. Little Bighorn and Monticello. I could go on. Yeah. Place I went. And never once did I see I got wrapped up in the cable news before I left on tour, like everybody else, and it was like it's like doing crack, And I know I'm smarter than this. They're selling ads. It's not really news; it's entertainment, right? And but what was keeping me addicted to it was like this divide they were talking about, and it was worrying me. And I'm like, well, God, I remember 9/11. Like how this country like had each other's backs, like that first month especially. There was no planes flying, and neighbors took care of neighbors. And at the grocery store, if somebody even stumbled, you'd like, are you okay? And that's the America I know, and the one I grew up with. And, the hurricanes down in Houston, the J.J. Watt Foundation, things like that, the fires in California, people come and help. Yeah. Nobody asks who you vote for. And going out and traveling, not just America, but the world, I go out and see all these nerdy tourist things. I'm rarely in my hotel room. And I just didn't see this divide. And I saw amazing things, in the crowd. I meet amazing people that have amazing stories of their own. They're coming to see our shows. But when you think you're the most interesting person in the room, you're 99.9% wrong. There's people with amazing stories that come to our shows, and I appreciate that. And I look out in the audience, and I know we're all in this thing together, the band and the audience, and these stories I was writing were things about that. The tenderness is a real reflection of the rest of the record. Yeah. About us being in this thing together, and
it almost sounds like a prayer. Almost, it's a plea for tenderness to present itself. Is that sort of the disposition you wrote it from?
Yeah, that was a poem kind of I'd written. Sometimes if I start writing a column or a chapter from a book, I might start it with just prose, like and it might be a poem. And tenderness, can't you feel us? Tenderness, won't you please come on down? There's a song called Parkland. I had kids that were in high school at the time of we can all agree. There's no debate. This is not an NRA. It's not a Second Amendment argument. It's nobody wants school shootings. Nobody. And it kills us all, and we all weep, and we all scratch our heads and are horrified. And so tenderness was sort of, I'd written Parkland, and tenderness was my answer to that kind of funeral dirge of this song called Parkland that's on the record.
Was Parkland the first
Can you
song
guys
you
hear
wrote?
me? Am I speaking loud enough? Yeah.
Was Parkland the first song you wrote for the record?
No, the first song I wrote, it's called Last September. And it was a result of some of the Me Too stories I was hearing. I do live with 3 women. I have 3 sisters, and I had a wonderful mom. And I had written a song called Follow Me to Hell for a Loaded record. And it was like what I would do if I was in the room with the guy. There was a guy who would killed a 15-year-old girl, like did what he did to her and then killed her down in San Diego, like in 2011. And I get so irate, and I kickbox, and I do stuff. And it's like, Follow Me to Hell is what I would do if I was in a room with that guy, And Last September is a more tender version of that. It's a fictionalized story. I kind of combined a bunch of stories of the things I heard as a result of the Me Too movement. And at the end of last September, there's redemption. The girl's going to be okay. And there's kind of this long refrain that kind of a mott the hoople, all the young dudes sort of thing, but about this young girl.
Right. I wanted to ask you about it's a song called "It Happened Last September," right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you wrote that, as you just said, coming out of the Me Too movement. I was just curious, as somebody who sort of lived through the, sex, drugs, and rock and roll days of the Sunset Strip, just coming out of that whole movement and just any sort of, revelations you may have had, now as an older, more wise man. Do you look back at those days any differently? Any experiences? Did you reassess them through a new lens?
Not at all, because I'll tell you why. Because the 80s was a totally different time. And that's not an excuse. I'm saying it was a totally different time. It was like, if you've ever read about like the 1920s Berlin, like this sexually open time when women were as free to fulfill their needs as much as men, and were as aggressive as men. Everything was just more open. It wasn't even aggression. It was just, let's have fun. And that was the 80s. Yeah. So you can't compare now to then. I don't. And even songs like It's So Easy there's a lot of humor in that song, because that song was written when nobody knew who our band was. Like, we make the fire, we miss the firefight. Like, nobody knew who we were. We were not, everything was not so easy. Everything was extremely hard. You get in a fight, you always win, which wasn't happening, and it was just like this kind of fantasy song. And there was a lot of humor in it. And I think our original fans at the beginning of the band got the humor of that song, and when it was written, before we were playing to like 3 people.
Yeah.
So the 80s were just such a different time than now. Since the 80s, I mean, there was AIDS in the 80s, but I worked at a bakery before I moved to LA for a year and a half with all gay men. It was myself and 7 gay men.
So where you worked with Bruce Pavitt?
Bruce Pavitt worked there.
Yeah.
Not a gay man.
No.
But he was a cook.
Did co-found Sub Pop?
He cooked. I was in the bakery. He was in the kitchen.
Okay.
He started Sub Pop, and I left to LA.
Yeah.
He's put out his first single, which is a great story in itself.
Yeah.
But when you work in a restaurant, anybody who's worked in a restaurant, everybody's everything. You share all your stuff. Intimate details, and no different with the gay men. And when HIV first happened, AIDS, it was called GRIDS. And if people remember that at all, gay-related immune deficiency syndrome. So it was thought of as a gay thing. So even up until about 88, then it was real, like, needles sharing and heterosexual sex was doing it too. But before that, there was just, the worst thing you could get, I guess, was probably herpes.
Right. Getting chuckles for herpes.
Sorry, guys.
It's not even new that Duff's talking about herpes.
Herpes is a toy you get down at the...
You talk about the party of the 80s, and when talking about that time in music, I always think of you ever see the movie The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke? There's a great scene where he's in a bar, and he's naming, I think he probably even names you guys, Guns N' Roses crew, and then he jokes, Cobain came along and ruined it all and ended the party. In your mind, when did that party end?
I lost a lot. It ended, I lost a good friend of mine, Jim, in 86, heroin OD. I was 21. Then these were very close friends of mine. My best friend, Todd Crew, died of a heroin overdose 8 months later. The party was starting to end. We were going from...
That's pre the debut album, though.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So Todd Crew was supposed to come with us on the Cult tour and work for us. That was our first tour across as a tour. And Todd was he died a couple weeks before that tour. I've never really got over that. And then people started to drop, and in our band there was people strung out, and the party started ending when my friends started dropping. I found myself getting more and more addicted to alcohol, and then eventually to drugs, and which was something I avoided for all through my. I mean, I did things in my teens for sure, and a lot of it, and then I stopped. Like, I'm a musician. This is what I'm going to do, and never. You don't, as you dream to be a musician, and then you put everything into it. I'm all in.
Yeah.
My cards are laid. I'm all in. I have no backup plan. College is not an option in my family. Like, there's 8 kids. My dad was a fireman. Like, if you want to go to college, like my brother Matt did, he put himself through college.
Right.
So, okay, there's that. But I was all in. But in that dream, my thing wasn't like, I'm going to be in music for the chicks or the I wanted to be a musician, like, for that feeling of that pure art of doing the thing and being in a real band that everybody's in it. And we found that band with Guns N' Roses once we found each other. But no part of that dream is, oh yeah, and I want to be a junkie.
Right.
And nobody I know, and friends of mine who have passed, so many have passed since those first 2 friends of mine passed.
Were you ever around Andy Wood in Seattle?
Yeah, we were very good friends.
Very good friends.
And the funniest guy.
Yeah.
You say his name and I start laughing
Yeah.
because it's the jokes and his band Malfunction. Like they were kind of like Kiss, Malfunction, a 3-piece, and they would play this room. There'd be 3 people in it, and Andy would be like, "All you people on the left say hell," and there'd be like, a janitor, hell. Yeah. All you on the right say yeah. And, yes. And they would play like there was 20,000 people there. Andy was an amazing spirit, and Andy passing, there was another one. I mean, there's too many to name.
And that kind of comes in with the song "Feel" that you wrote for this record.
Right. Yeah. So nobody here has heard the record yet, and
So what a great topic to talk about.
right. Yeah. So I wrote a song called "Feel." Scott Weiland from my band Velvet Revolver, from Stone Temple Pilots. That band ended really because Scott had gotten back to drugs, and we'd gone through this amazing experience of getting sober, and we played a large part in that. I went to the mountains with him, like a Bruce Lee camp kind of thing. It was just him and I, Dave Kushner, and a Kung Fu Sifu. And it was like something out of a Bruce Lee movie. Yeah. And he got clean, and he got his family back. And it was this great story. And the band took off, and it was wonderful seeing him back with his family and this success and all of this. And he's a wonderful, sober guy and wonderful dad and all this stuff. And he saw the drugs start to creep back in during the second record and then take over. That kind of ended our thing. And once he had lost his family, I could see, you could see the end coming, and it did. And Chris Cornell and his ex-wife, Susan Silver, and my wife, Susan, were pregnant at the same time. We were in Seattle with Lily and our daughter, May. 2 pregnant, wives, and then we had babies 2 weeks apart, and we hung out a lot, and I saw a really great side of Chris. I knew him since before I moved to LA. So losing Chris, and a couple weeks later, Prince, which is a huge influence on me since. I mean, everybody says they have a record that saved their life, and 1999 was this record that gave me. Everybody around me in Seattle was strung out. And that record gave me the strength and courage to move to LA on my own. It didn't save my life, but it gave me the courage. And so losing Prince and then Chester, right after that, we're friends with Linda, his wife, and the kids, and we go to dinner and stuff. We went to dinner. And so I sat down with a G chord and an F chord and a C chord and wrote this song. And the chorus is, feel when the lights go down, you are still here. All you hold dear remains. And it's just about keeping the spirit of those four, that's the four most recent, close. And I think the song will probably speak to all of us that are fans of those guys, or anybody you've lost, really.
We're running out of time here. We're going to go to Twitter in just a second, but I do want to. There's few moments in my mind, and I'm sure you guys will agree, that are bigger in terms of seeing a video for the first time than when Welcome to the Jungle came on MTV in the late 80s. And we have the video right here, and I'm just curious if we can roll really quick. Where were you personally? I'm sure we all each have our own memories, but where were you
right around the corner?
Where were you personally when you first saw this on television for the very first time? Because that had to be a monumental moment for you in your life.
Look at that.
That's how it happened, right?
Yeah, basically. It's Shooter Jennings, who did my record, who produced my record, this record. He saw this video when he was a kid. And he's like, I'm the guy getting off the bus. He came from Nashville, and he did it. Where was I personally when I saw it on TV for the first time? MTV played it at 3 a.m., I think, was the first time they played
Like
it.
Headbangers Ball.
Not even. Like, they
even?
played it in the middle of the night because this was not normal rock and roll for the time. We were quite a bit different and looked at as somewhat, I guess, maybe dangerous or aggressive or whatever. And so MTV wouldn't play us. And there was some pleas from our record company, like, okay, just play it at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And I guess they got so many calls in to play it more. I don't think I owned a TV is the problem at the time. So I don't remember. I can't tell you. I remember the first time hearing this on the radio.
Right.
K-Rock played it in L.A., and that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Seeing the video, the thing about videos and me and records and me, once you make the record, that's it, I'm done. You go out and play the songs. I never listen to the record again, except when we got back and started rehearsing. I listened to Appetite over and over, and like got my parts down. I mean, they're still in my body. I listened to Illusions, and I listened to Chinese Democracy, and like really went down a rabbit hole on my own bands and my own playing and stuff, which is kind of cool. But yeah, look at that.
Yeah. What a time. That actually, what you just said, it leads into the first Twitter question. It comes from @DylanCoxTV. Duff, how different was the approach from your last solo record, Believe in Me?
Yeah, it's funny. That is, I guess, my last solo record. I did a lot of loaded records in between, which are they're loaded records. We are a band, but it is me singing. So this is I look at it as like my 5th solo record. But Believe in Me, I was really making demos. We were on the Use Your Illusions tour. I played drums, and I played everything on that record. I had guests like Slash played on it, and Sebastian Bach and Lenny Kravitz and Jeff Beck. But we were on the road, and I was out of my mind. I was completely out of my mind, and you can hear there's kids in this room, so I don't want to. I was out of my mind. And that record, Believe Me, is a great snapshot of me in a really lost, trying to find myself out of this like sort of wet cardboard box that I got myself stuck in and couldn't quite punch my way out of. This record now, my faculties. What is it? Faculties, right? Faculties were intact, and I was really kind of trying to not make a statement with this record, but perhaps start some healing. And I hope to do some things with some nonprofits for homeless and for suicide prevention with some of the songs. Yeah. And I think that's going to get announced tomorrow or Monday.
Cool.
Those things.
Right on.
Yeah.
Let's get to the first studio audience question. It'll come from right over here.
Hi. Wow. I'm a huge fan, and you're like my.
Isn't it weird hearing your voice through a
Yeah, it's a little
microphone?
weird. And talking to you, I'm like, you're like my inspiration. So I was wondering what your influence was for the album.
Yeah, just that. Just the going out on the road and experiencing the world, not only through our tour and the audiences, but going out and seeing things and talking to people across America, across the globe. And we circled the globe 4 times, so I got to talk to a lot of people. I'm a talker and a very curious person. So those experiences influenced the making of this record.
What about the genre? Sorry, piggybacking.
Yeah. What did you say?
What about the genre of the album? Because it's going a little country, isn't it?
Oh, I did. Yeah, the country side of it was not super intentional. I have no background in country, but I was trying to go for Johnny Thunder's. My influence is country, or would be Thunder's acoustic, Que Sera Sera, So Alone, Mark Lanigan's first 2 records, Winding Sheets and Whiskey for the Holy Ghost, Greg Dooley, Twilight Singers. That's the mode, kind of record. I wanted to make a record like this for 20 years. Yeah.
Shout out to River Rise. That's a great song by Mark Lanigan. Fantastic.
Dude, River Rises. Yeah. If you haven't heard River Rise, just you're welcome. Go home and listen to River Rise.
Definitely
you're
check that out. Second question right here.
Hi, how are you today?
Good. Very good. Thank you.
Cool. So I'm a huge fan of punk music, and I love the punk documentary on Epics. And in my opinion, the best part wasn't even the documentary, it was the interview session that took place. So what was it like sitting in between Johnny Rotten and Marky Ramone during that little...
Luckily, I didn't sit between Johnny Rotten and Marky Ramone. I was on the other side. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of punk music, too, and grew up playing in punk bands, and hence I'm in the documentary talking about the West Coast scene. And I've actually gone down a rabbit hole recently. I saw TSOL twice in the last, 4 weeks, and I saw the original Fear, 4 weeks ago. Well, what do I want to say about that? This is on. It was something that didn't need to happen. I think a lot of thoughts were going through my head. I had my wife and one of my daughters sitting right in front of me, so I had many thoughts of all right, I'm going to end this all now physically. But I didn't. I'm a sober guy. I have a lot of sympathy for people that are in the middle of addiction. So I kind of left it at that.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great question. We have time for one more quick question. It'll come from right here.
Hi, Duff. It's weird hearing my voice on the mic, but speaking of punk too, I wore this shirt for you, Johnny Thunders.
Thank you very much.
Anyway, I was gonna ask about when you're having dark days or when you just don't know how you're gonna get through it. How do you get through it? Because I know you've had a lot of those, considering you were in addiction and all that. So
Yeah. Yes. I've had recently in the last 5 years some experience with depression, which came out of nowhere for me, absolutely out of nowhere, and that's debilitating as it gets. You can't breathe, you can't put your shoes on, you can't drive. But it reminded me when I was strung out and when I got myself out of that, which is just you have to move forward, and you have to move forward, and that just means one step in front of the other. And for me, fortunately, I found martial arts, and it's hitting the bag. It's jumping rope. Just jump one, rotation at a time for me, or get out and run, and just put one foot in front of the other. And I do it physically, and then I can get into my center from that. But if you're struggling, if I can get through it, anybody can get through it. I promise you that, because I was the worst and the most hopeless case in my eyes. And if I can get through it, anybody can. Yeah.
Great question. Great. Yeah, round of applause, please. All right, we're unfortunately out of time, Duff, but thank you so much again for coming on Build. The record Tenderness out and available everywhere May 31st. One final round of applause for our friend Duff.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.